The cargo was supposed to be broken machinery, but it was breathing asterisk Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his brow as he maneuvered the cargo hauler Starfall through the debris field of the Kepler sector. The ship groaned under the strain of atmospheric entry, her hull plates singing a familiar tune of stressed metal. 3 weeks into what should have been a routine salvage operation, Jake was beginning to question his decision to take this job. The contract had come through encrypted channels from the Hegemony Trading Consortium. Simple enough. Retrieve a cargo pod from a derelict research vessel. No questions asked. The payment was generous enough to ignore the red flags, and Jake needed the credits to keep his ship running. His crew of 2, engineer Tom Bradley and navigator Nina Rodriguez, had been with him for years. They trusted his judgment, even when it led them into questionable territory. "Captain, I'm picking up the target vessel on long-range sensors," Nina called from the navigation station. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up a 3-dimensional map of the sector. "The meridian is approximately 2 clicks off our starboard bow, drifting in the shadow of asteroid designation Alpha 7. Jake leaned forward in his command chair, studying the display. The research vessel appeared intact from the outside, though dark and lifeless. No power signatures, no life signs, just another ghost ship in a graveyard of forgotten conflicts. The Kepler sector had seen its share of corporate wars, leaving behind a trail of abandoned vessels and broken dreams. "Tom, what's the status on our boarding equipment?" Jake asked, turning to face the engineer, who was hunched over a diagnostic panel. "All systems green, Captain. Magnetic clamps are charged, atmospheric suits are prepped, and I've got the cutting torch ready in case we need to make our own entrance." Tom's weathered face bore the scars of a lifetime spent in the bowels of starships. He was methodical, reliable, and never asked uncomfortable questions about their cargo dot as they approached the meridian. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The ship's design was unlike anything he'd seen before, with organic curves and bioluminescent panels that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. It was definitely human-built, but the technology appeared decades ahead of current standards. "Nina, are you sure this is the right ship? The registration numbers match, but the design doesn't look like anything in the corporate database." "Affirmative. Captain, this is definitely the vessel we're looking for, though I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the cargo bay. It's almost like there's something alive in there." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The contract had specified that the cargo was damaged research equipment, nothing more. But as they docked with the Meridian, he could swear he heard something through the hull of his own ship. A rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. The boarding process was routine until they reached the cargo bay. The doors were sealed with biometric locks, but Tom's expertise with security systems made short work of them. As the massive doors slid open, revealing the darkened interior, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The cargo bay was filled with dozens of cylindrical containers, each one roughly the size of a coffin. They were arranged in perfect rows, connected by a network of tubes and cables that pulsed with a faint blue light. The air was thick with humidity, and Jake could hear the unmistakable sound of breathing. "Tom, scan one of those containers," Jake ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The engineer approached the nearest cylinder with his scanner, his hands trembling slightly. After a moment, he looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Captain, these aren't containers. They're stasis pods, and according to my readings, there's something alive in each one." Jake felt his world tilt on its axis. This wasn't a simple salvage operation. This was something else entirely, something that could get them all killed if they weren't careful. But as he looked at the rows of pods, each one containing a living being, he knew there was no turning back. The nearest stasis pod hummed with an otherworldly energy as Jake approached it. The transparent aluminum viewing port was fogged with condensation, but he could make out the vague outline of a humanoid figure inside. The biomonitors displayed vital signs that were definitely not human, yet strangely familiar. "Tom, can you access the pod's data logs?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. The engineer nodded and connected his diagnostic tablet to the pod's interface. Lines of code scrolled across the screen in a language that Jake didn't recognize. "I'm getting fragmented data, Captain. Most of the files are corrupted, but from what I can piece together, this is some kind of experimental program. Code name, Project Synthesis." Nina had been exploring the other side of the cargo bay, and her voice echoed through the comm system. "Captain, you need to see this. There's a control room at the far end of the bay, and it's still got power." Jake reluctantly left the pod and followed Nina through the maze of containers. The control room was smaller than he expected, with walls covered in monitors and control panels. Most of the screens were dark, but one large display showed a rotating, three-dimensional model of what appeared to be a hybrid creature, part human and part something else. "This is impossible," Jake muttered, studying the display. The creature's DNA structure was unlike anything in the scientific databases. It had human characteristics, but also genetic markers from dozens of other species, some of which Jake didn't recognize. Tom's voice crackled through the comm. "Captain, I've managed to access more of the pod's data. According to these logs, the Meridian was conducting genetic experiments on volunteers from various species. They were trying to create some kind of super soldier, combining the best traits from multiple alien races." Jake felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. What happened to the crew? "The logs are fragmented, but it looks like there was some kind of accident. The test subjects began to show signs of higher intelligence than expected, and they started to resist the experiments. The crew tried to sedate them, but something went wrong with the stasis systems." As if summoned by Tom's words, a soft chime echoed through the cargo bay. One of the pods began to glow brighter, and Jake could see the figure inside beginning to move. The vital signs on the monitor spiked, and suddenly the pod began to open with a hiss of escaping gases. "Everyone back to the ship now," Jake shouted, but it was too late. The pod's occupant was already stirring, and as the stasis fluid drained away, Jake got his first clear look at what they were dealing with. The creature was roughly humanoid in shape, but its skin had a metallic sheen that seemed to shift and change in the light. Its eyes were larger than a human's, with pupils that dilated independently. When it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth, but when it spoke, its voice was surprisingly gentle. "Please," it said in perfectly accented English, "don't be afraid. We are not your enemies." Jake's hand moved instinctively, too, his sidearm, but something in the creature's voice stopped him. There was intelligence there, and more than that, there was pain. "What are you?" "We are what you might call an experiment that succeeded too well," the creature replied, slowly sitting up in the pod. "The scientists who created us thought they were making weapons, but they gave us something far more valuable. They gave us the ability to think, to feel, to choose our own path." More pods began to chime and open around the cargo bay. Dozens of similar creatures were awakening, each one unique in its own way. Some had reptilian features, others appeared more insectoid, but all of them moved with the same careful grace as the first one. "The crew of this ship," the creature continued, "they tried to terminate the project when they realized what they had created. But we defended ourselves, and in the chaos, the ship was damaged. We've been in stasis for months, waiting for someone to find us." Jake looked around at the awakening creatures, his mind racing. These weren't weapons or monsters. They were people, created by humans, but abandoned by their creators. And now they were his responsibility. "What do you want from us?" he asked. The creature smiled, and despite its alien features, The expression was achingly human. We want what every sentient being wants. We want to be free. The cargo bay of the Meridian had transformed into something resembling a refugee camp. Dozens of the hybrid creatures moved around the space, helping their companions adjust to consciousness after months in stasis. Jake watched them with fascination and growing concern as they organized themselves with military precision. The first creature to awaken had introduced itself as Zara, apparently a name it had chosen for itself during the experiments. She seemed to be their leader, coordinating the awakening process and ensuring that the weaker members of their group received priority attention. Captain Morrison, Zara approached him with fluid grace. We need to discuss our situation. The ship's life support systems are failing, and we cannot remain here much longer. Jake nodded, having reached the same conclusion. My ship can't carry all of you. We're talking about 60+ individuals, and the Starfall has life support for maybe 8 people maximum. We understand the limitation, Zara replied. But we also understand that returning us to the hegemony would mean our deaths. The project files we've accessed make it clear that we were to be terminated upon completion of the research. Tom's voice crackled through Jake's unit. Captain, I've been analyzing the ship's systems. The Meridian isn't as damaged as we thought. The main reactor is offline, but the backup fusion cells are still functional. With some work, we might be able to get her moving again. Jake felt a spark of hope. How long would it take? Give me 12 hours with Nina's help, and we can have basic propulsion and life support restored. It won't be pretty, but it'll get them where they need to go. And where exactly would that be? Jake asked, turning back to Zara. The hybrid creatures. Expression became thoughtful. There are colonies in the outer rim, beyond hegemony control. Places where beings like us might find acceptance, or at least tolerance. We don't need much, just a chance to exist. Jake considered the options. The smart play would be to contact the hegemony, turn over the cargo as contracted, and collect his payment. But looking at these creatures, seeing the intelligence and hope in their eyes, he knew he couldn't do it. They weren't cargo. They were people. Nina, plot a course for the outer rim, he called over the comm. Specifically, look for any colonies that might be friendly to refugees. Captain, Nina's voice carried a note of concern. The hegemony will consider this breach of contract. They'll blacklist us, maybe put a bounty on our heads. I know, Jake replied. But some things are more important than contracts. Zara stepped closer to him. You would risk everything for us? You don't even know us. I know enough, Jake said firmly. I know that you're people, not weapons. And I know that everyone deserves a chance at freedom. Over the next several hours, Jake watched his crew work alongside the hybrid creatures to restore the Meridian systems. The cooperation was remarkable. The creatures had inherited enhanced problem-solving abilities from their various genetic sources, and their suggestions proved invaluable in the repair process. Tom worked with a creature that had mantis-like appendages, perfect for reaching into tight spaces. Nina coordinated with another hybrid that had enhanced mathematical abilities, calculating navigation routes with incredible precision. It was a testament to the adaptability of both human and alien nature. As the repairs progressed, Jake found himself in conversation with Zara about their origins. She explained that the volunteers for the project had come from dozens of different species, all seeking something better than their current lives. The scientists had promised them enhanced abilities, longer lifespans, and the opportunity to be part of something greater. What they didn't expect, Zara continued, was that combining genetic material from so many different species would create something entirely new. We have the best traits of our component races, but we also have something none of them possessed. Individually, which is the ability to see beyond the differences that divide species. We understand cooperation in ways that our parent races never could. We are living proof that diversity creates strength. Jake felt a surge of pride in his species. Despite their flaws, humans had created something beautiful here, even if they hadn't intended to. The hybrids represented the best of what cooperation between species could achieve. As the Meridian's lights flickered back to life, Jake made his decision. He would see this through, no matter the cost. These creatures deserved their chance at freedom, and he would do everything in his power to ensure they got it. "Zara," he called out, "welcome to the first day of your new lives." 3 days into their journey toward the outer rim, Jake's decision came back to haunt him. The starfall shuddered as warning klaxons blared throughout the ship, and Nina's urgent voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've got company. 3 hegemony interceptors coming in fast on our starboard side." Jake rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed the approaching vessels in stark detail. The interceptors were sleek, predatory ships designed for one purpose: hunting down fugitives and bringing them back to face hegemony justice. "Distance?" Jake asked, dropping into his command chair. 12,000 kilometers and closing. They're broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. The communication system crackled to life with an authoritative voice. "This is Commander Vincent Hayes of the Hegemony Security Force. You are in violation of contract and in possession of classified materials. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." Jake recognized the name. Vincent Hayes was a decorated officer known for his ruthless efficiency in handling corporate disputes. The fact that the hegemony had sent him meant they were taking this situation very seriously. "Tom, what's the status on the Meridian?" Jake called through the comm. "She's holding together, Captain, but her weapon systems are still offline. The hybrids are working on it, but we need more time." Jake weighed his options. The Starfall was a cargo hauler, not a warship. Against 1 interceptor, they might have a chance. Against 3, they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. "Nina, can we reach the asteroid field before they catch us?" "Negative, Captain. They'll be within weapons range in 4 minutes." Jake was about to order surrender when Zara's voice came through the comm from the Meridian. "Captain Morrison, may I suggest an alternative?" "I'm listening." "Several of our people have experience with military systems. If you can buy us 2 more minutes, we can bring the Meridian's defensive systems online." Jake looked at the tactical display. The interceptors were closing fast, but the Meridian was a research vessel with experimental technology. It might have capabilities that the hegemony ships weren't expecting. "All right, Zara. 2 minutes. Nina, evasive maneuvers. Tom, give me everything the engines can handle." The next 2 minutes stretched into an eternity. The Starfall weaved through space, dodging the interceptor's pursuit while staying close to the Meridian. Jake watched the distance close on the tactical display, knowing that any moment the hegemony ships would open fire. 30 seconds, Captain," Nina called out. "Meridian to Starfall." Zara's voice was calm despite the chaos. "Defensive systems are online. We're ready. What exactly are you planning?" Jake asked. "You'll see." The lead interceptor opened fire, sending a barrage of plasma bolts toward the 2 fleeing ships. Jake braced for impact, but the shots never connected. Instead, they seemed to bend around the Meridian, deflected by some kind of energy field. "That's impossible," Nina whispered, staring at her sensors. "Not impossible." Zara's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "The Meridian was equipped with experimental shielding technology. We've just figured out how to use it properly." The interceptors regrouped, trying different attack vectors, but the result was the same. The Meridian's shields deflected every shot, and the energy seemed to strengthen rather than weaken the defensive field. Commander Hayes' voice crackled through the comm again. this time with less confidence. "What kind of technology are you using? Our weapons aren't even scratching your shields." Jake smiled grimly. "The kind that proves you shouldn't have abandoned your research subjects." The tide of the battle turned when the Meridian's weapon systems came online. The hybrid creatures had not only repaired the ship's defenses, but had improved them, combining their enhanced problem-solving abilities with the ship's advanced technology. Energy beams lanced out from the research vessel, not to destroy but to disable. The interceptors found their weapon systems offline, their engines failing, and their communication arrays scrambled. It was a display of technological superiority that left the hegemony forces helpless. "Commander Hayes," Jake called over the comm, "I suggest you return to your masters and tell them that their property has decided to emancipate itself. The age of treating sentient beings as cargo is over." In the aftermath of the confrontation, Jake found himself aboard the Meridian, standing in the restored bridge alongside Zara and several other hybrids. The ship hummed with renewed life, its systems operating at efficiency levels that exceeded its original specifications. "You could have destroyed those ships," Jake observed. "We could have," Zara agreed, "but we chose not to. We are not weapons. Captain Morrison, we are something better. We are what happens when different species choose cooperation over conflict." Jake nodded, understanding the profound truth in her words. These creatures represented more than just scientific achievement. They were living proof that the galaxy's future lay not in the dominance of any single species, but in the unity of all. 6 months after the encounter with the hegemony interceptors, Jake stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching as the Meridian docked with the growing space station. The hybrid creatures had found their home in the outer rim, but they hadn't simply settled down and disappeared from galactic affairs. Instead, they had become catalysts for change throughout the galaxy. Word of their existence had spread through underground networks, reaching the ears of oppressed peoples on dozens of worlds. The message was simple but powerful. Freedom was possible, and those who sought it were not alone. "Captain Morrison," Zara approached him with the same graceful stride she had possessed since awakening from stasis. "The Council would like to speak with you." Jake followed her through the station's corridors, marveling at the transformation that had taken place. Haven Station had started as a small mining outpost, but under the guidance of the hybrids, it had become a beacon of hope for refugees and outcasts from across the galaxy. The council chamber was a circular room with representatives from dozens of species, both natural and hybrid. The atmosphere was one of quiet determination, of beings who had found purpose beyond their individual struggles. Captain Morrison, an elderly Zephyrian with silver-scaled skin, spoke from the center of the circle. "We have gathered to discuss the future of our movement. The hegemony has issued bounties on all of us, and there are reports of increased corporate security in the outer rim." Jake nodded. The success of the hybrids had not gone unnoticed by the powers that controlled the galaxy's core systems. "What do you need from me?" "We need ships," another council member replied. This one a hybrid with crystalline features that refracted light in beautiful patterns. "More people are seeking freedom every day, and we lack the resources to transport them safely." "We also need allies," Zara added. "The hegemony has powerful friends, but so do we. There are human colonies that have expressed interest in our cause, and several alien governments have quietly offered support." Jake felt a surge of pride at the mention of human involvement. His species had created these remarkable beings, and now they were choosing to stand with them rather than against them. "I can organize a small fleet," Jake said. "Tom and Nina have been recruiting pilots and engineers who believe in the cause. We won't be able to match the hegemony's firepower, but we can provide mobility and support." "That would be invaluable," the Zephyrian elder said. "But we must ask something difficult of you. The hegemony has placed a substantial bounty on your head, Captain. Associating with us puts you in constant danger. Jake smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought him to this moment. I stopped caring about danger the moment I saw those stasis pods. Some things are worth fighting for. Over the following weeks, Jake worked with the Hybrid Council to establish what they called the Liberation Fleet. It was a motley collection of cargo haulers, passenger transports, and the occasional armed escort, all crewed by volunteers who believed in the cause of freedom. The fleet's first major operation was the evacuation of a labor camp on Kepler Prime, where several hundred beings from various species had been working in conditions that barely qualified as slavery. The operation was a complete success, with the fleet extracting the workers and their families without a single casualty. News of the liberation spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. The corporate media tried to spin it as terrorism, but the independent journalists who had witnessed the operation told a different story. They spoke of precision, compassion, and a commitment to preserving life that stood in stark contrast. The hegemony's brutal efficiency. As Jake stood on the bridge of the Starfall, watching the rescued workers board transport ships bound for Haven Station, he reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter in the cargo bay of the Meridian. The hybrids had not just found their freedom. They had become the catalyst for a galaxy-wide awakening. "Captain," Nina called from the navigation station, "we're receiving a transmission from the hegemony. It's Commander Hayes." Jake had been expecting this moment. "Put him through." Hayes' face appeared on the main screen, his expression a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. "Captain Morrison, you've caused quite a stir in the core systems. There are some who want to classify you as a terrorist. And others?" Jake asked. "Others are calling you a hero. The Senate has begun investigating the conditions in corporate labor camps, and several major contracts have been canceled due to public pressure." Jake felt a surge of hope. "Are you here to arrest me, Commander?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "I'm here to offer you a choice. The hegemony is prepared to offer full pardons to you and your crew, along with substantial compensation, if you abandon this crusade. And if I refuse, then the hunt continues. But I should warn you, Captain, you've inspired others. There are reports of liberation movements on 17 different worlds, all following the example you and your hybrid allies have set." Jake smiled, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so empty and cold. Now they were filled with possibility, with the promise of a future where freedom was not a privilege to be bought, but a right to be claimed. "Commander Hayes," he said finally, "tell the hegemony that their offer is rejected. We have work to do." As the transmission ended, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. Zara had joined him on the bridge, her expression proud and determined. "Thank you, Captain," she said simply, "for giving us the chance to become who we were meant to be." Jake looked at her, seeing not just the hybrid creature created in a laboratory, but the embodiment of hope itself. "No, Zara, thank you for showing us what we could become." The cargo that was supposed to be broken machinery had indeed been breathing, but more than that, it had been dreaming. And now those dreams were becoming reality, one liberated world at a time.